felt that Figueroa, the cars drive too quickly. It's too fast. And we need to take various means to bring the speed down to make it safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. There were several ideas floated around. Bike lanes were a priority at our table, and not just sharrows, but bike lanes is a very effective way to slow things down, as has happened on York since they've been implemented. I understand the safety's improved on York and traffic speeds have been lowered on York. Other things that came up were more plantings, possible bulb outs at the bus stops. A few people mentioned that the bulb outs can be dangerous for cyclists and for cars if they're too deep. Maybe they don't have to be an entire lane width, parking space width deep, because people drive over them and bicyclists get forced out into traffic. So maybe those don't have to be so large. We also talked about what am I missing? Oh, we had a great idea from Stuart Rappaport to bring back old school traffic cops directing traffic in the streets at several of the key intersections, possibly at peak traffic times, to both create jobs and as a real way to slow traffic down, and to harken back to the historic nature of Highland Park, which I thought was pretty cool. And then what else did we talk about? Help me out. Reduce the lane widths of each of the traffic lanes.
Avenue 58 is a parklet.
Oh yeah, and we talked about Avenue 58, where the farmers market is now. That sort of dead ends. It's a short street. It's the only one, and it dead ends at the metro station. That you could create kind of a parklet there that would reinforce the use of the farmers market. And create a festive space. Yeah, there we go. I brought a few images in from other cities. This is San Antonio, and I believe this is somewhere in Spain, where they have this sort of wonderful temporary light and airy, colorful structures that span the street. So you can still use it as a street, but it becomes this kind of festive space for all kinds of community events, and directs people from Figueroa to the metro station, lets them know, hey, there's this metro stop down here, and it's a clear way to point it out. I would also say, sometimes the streets get a little monotonous. I can't always identify which street is which, and maybe if there was a little more variety in how the streets were assigned, or color, or some art, a moment, an artistic moment might happen at the different intersections, so you know where you are. Did I miss anything? No? Is that good? Okay, thank you.
There are about three main concerns at our table. One was bike lanes all over the place. The other were trees. And one of my main points, and some bump outs so there can be outdoor dining from some people. My main point is all these rectangular spaces are places that used to be large theaters in Highland Park. The Highland Theater is where Charlie Chaplin used to do some of his premieres. Norman Desmond was there at that theater for the opening night. So there's a huge economic structure of buildings large enough for multiple performing art spaces to be here that would balance the visual art corridor along York. And then they would, connected by Avenue 50, you could have an arts vans that circle those triangles and just drop people off to different galleries and performing art spaces and restaurants and all of that. I mean, that's one of the main areas that we're pushing in Teatro Arroyo to start a theater there. So I have my own interests. I started a theater in San Diego, and that became in downtown, San Diego Repertory Theater. So I watched downtown change, and I watched a lot of artists move in and then have to move out. So there has to be an infrastructure for the artists to be really grounded in an area. So there are these are almost like battleships for performing arts. All these rectangular spaces look like buildings that once were theaters. So in that one 10-block area, there were probably 8 or 10 theaters or clubs or various spaces. That creates a lot of jobs. It creates people coming in on the Gold Line, the back bike paths to see the arts. So that can be a huge economic engine. We're interested in jobs and the arts. That's our concern. And on the list on economic revitalization, the arts wasn't on that list. A lot of those things were not big economic engine things. So I think the economic revitalization should actually include the arts. Winston-Salem discovered that, Salt Lake City discovered that, San Diego discovered that, cities all over the country, even LA in parts, but LA is so spread out, it's taken hold. But in this neighborhood, our arts have always been sort of the center of the community. We have to build ways that the arts can stay here. Is there anything else that I left? Parking. If anything, because of the infrastructure that wants to come alive, there should really be more parking, but not necessarily street parking if all these other improvements are going to happen. In San Diego and North Park, which is just packed now with restaurants and spoken word groups and different dance companies and different things in North Park, San Diego, they actually had the wisdom when they brought back a theater to build a 5-story parking structure there, which may not be right for this neighborhood, but they're the one place that actually said parking is actually an economic engine. Instead of looking at how it's being used now, look at how it's going to be used in 5 years, and it's going to be very different. I mean, you live here, you can see how everything is changing overnight.
Traffic calming is something we're all agreeing.
Oh, yes,
Every table agrees we need to slow people down on Figueroa. The crosswalks are not set at the correct standard of timing. It's now 3.5 feet per second is the required amount of time for crossing. Once these traffic lights are readjusted, some of them are 95 feet crossing Figueroa. Do the math yourself. You're looking at a 30-second signal versus an 18 to 20-second signal. It'll get people across the street. It definitely will slow down the traffic, having those lights red for a full 30 seconds for people to cross. That seems to be an easy, inexpensive solution to slowing everyone down. And I think that is something that we all agree on.
And one other thing, we want to turn that bank building into a theater, but also a training area for children in all the arts. So a multi-arts complex and training space that trains people, but also gives them an avenue into the profession.
So my name is Alec, I'm with Table 3. A lot of people talked about safety on Fig, of course. There was some discussion about adding bike lanes, some concern about what effect that would have on businesses. There's discussion about adding diagonal parking to increase the amount of parking availability along the corridor. There was strong interest in more street furniture, so parklets, benches, curb cuts. There was talk about putting a roundabout at which intersection? 57. And then enhancing the crosswalk further up the street. Which one was that? Was it 60?
By the fire station. Yeah.
By the fire station. So yeah.
You should share a statement about multimodal.
Yeah, so there was talk about multimodal nature of the neighborhood. So we have the Gold Line, we have Fig that may be able to serve pedestrians and bus activity, and then you've got the freeway. So it's a truly multimodal neighborhood. I think that sums it up, basically.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rebecca, Table 4. Similar to everyone else, yes, slowing the street down. A lot of concern around the crosswalks. Some specific ones that came up repeatedly and we talked a lot about included Avenue 60 with the post office and the fire station, as well as Avenue 51, Food for Less. I think we've all tried to cross that at some point, way off the map. The things that we were universally agreed on seem to be more trees and creating a better sense of community on the street. So everyone was excited about park benches and planters and creating spaces for people to interact more. There's definitely some talk about signage that helped create, that you have entered the zone, which is a safer pedestrian area for everyone. And we talked a little bit about curb pop-outs, but primarily weren't really satisfied with any of the areas that for curb pop-outs, but we definitely wanted to create more four-way, long-term crosswalk opportunities at a couple points along Figueroa, even though technically the intersections are too wide because it's not a straight across. The four-way pedestrian crosswalks like in Pasadena, we think that's a great model. And yes, thank you. Islands in the middle of the street for safety, for greenery, for creating a nicer space in general. I think that's it. There are things that everybody else already touched upon. Oh, right, the big black lighting pole between 54 and 51. So, yeah.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your evening for sharing your ideas. To give you the timeline of how all this is working. It's going to be ongoing, but for the Metro Call for Projects, this Friday the city's technical team is coming back with their recommendations. This will be included. I have this information to also share with them on our projects. But even if we're not selected after Friday, when their recommendations come from the technical team, it will go to the Transportation Committee and then to the full council before council goes out of session on December 16th or in the first week in January. But pretty much by the December 16th is when council goes out on recess. So we will know then whether or not this is one of the projects that will be submitted. I think it has a very strong chance. We've done our best to make sure it is, and with your input, and then the application would be submitted in January. The Metro Board would make their final determination in September of 2015 on this grant application. In the interim, we will still, if the city does move forward with applications on the active transportation program, second round, we would be submitting this one as well. So we will not give up on funding to get these improvements done. So thank you all for coming out tonight. We greatly appreciate the time you've taken in the cold room and in the wet weather. Thank you.